A moth walked into a psychiatrist's office. He sat down. The doctor was filling out his notes in some kind of high-tech gizmo software. Doc was so old, he didn't even know how the software worked. He didn't even know how a software worked. But he was a great doctor. He had saved lives. So many lives. You know how? Through words. The moth sat down. Silently. Silent as a mime. The doctor was muttering an old poem to himself that only he knew. Because he'd wrote it a long time ago and never shared it with anybody. Whenever he had a hard time with software that he was too old to understand, he always recited this old poem. The moth heard him muttering. And he realized it must be a poem. Because he'd looked up the doctor's social media, and the moth knew how to hack. Actually, he was a hacker moth from Planet Moth Hackers. And he just sat there. He knew maybe he'd get booted out, because he knew it was after hours, and maybe technically he was breaking some kind of law, but he loved poetry. He did. And he needed help. Like nobody's beeswax. See, this colony of ants had invaded the moth's home. The moth had a beautiful moth home with a beautiful moth wife. Her name was Grushenka Revittelstiksten. See, in moth culture, a moth will not give his father's name to his wife, but they draw names out of a hat at Mothapalooza and Mothtopia. And he'd heard somebody talking about Grushenka Revittelstiksten one time on a DVD commentary box set. And it was right when his wife was getting so angry at him because he hadn't put away the jam. And he still had jam on his mandibles. She caught him literally red-handed. I mean, red mandible, technically. But. And, in anger, he just wanted to admit it one time to somebody that he had screamed at her. Curse you, Grushenka Revittelstiksten. And his wife had divorced him for that. You see, moth ladies take things very personally. And the doctor was there at his computer, still struggling with the software, still muttering that old poem that in his old age he'd almost begun to forget, even though he'd recited it 1,000 times. You see, the doctor needed help too. And he wasn't too proud to admit it. It's just, who's going to help a man that great? But eventually the poem came back to him. And the poem went, beautiful sky and night so black. Your lightning bolt strikes my heart like a tack. And when he remembered the poem, he said it and smiled, and he got through his software problem and was able to record his notes for the day, which was very necessary because of processes instituted by the illustrious American Psychological Association. Moth was pissed. Pissed because he couldn't write poems that good. And he had this weird suspicion, I guess because he was a little paranoid after Grushenka Revittelsticks divorced him. And he couldn't remember something, too. He couldn't remember the name of that DVD commentary. He pulled out one Audinaki from a DVD box set. And the DVD box set was bought by his father-in-law. And he nicknamed him Lord Revittelsticks in private to his buddies at the Moth Club. But even his buddies who played pool and billiards and backgammon at the Moth Club had told the Moth, "You're screwed. Once a Moth lady divorces you, that's final. Ain't no way out, Buster Brown. Simply no way. You're up shit creek with no paddle." And the Moth thought that might be true. In fact, that was why he was there. Well, the doctor started to feel an itch. At the back of his head, and maybe it must have been eyeballs in the back of his head or something. Because he swiveled around. And he screamed. Because he saw a humanoid moth from Mothtopia sitting there like this. And dang it. The Moth almost got up then and there and flew away, because he knew the look. He'd been troubling humans before by accident. He was just such a big moth, and he knew that people didn't like big moths, especially when they landed, say, in their private gardens at night, or when they tried to observe religious rituals, for example, by knocking on the door. You see, he'd been walking all through the town, knocking on churches, synagogues, and mosques, and no one would open the door for him at all. And he had crisscrossed through every denomination on the earth, and then he visited the Buddhists and the Hindus, and they didn't have any truck with the Mothman either. It was only when he came to the door of an acupuncturist who studied yoga that he got one piece of kind of good advice. That's all he got. He said, "Go see a psychiatrist, you stupid moth." So that's why he was there. But he didn't want to waste the good doctor's time. He sighed and he said to the doctor, "I'll leave if you want. I only came here because I thought maybe. And he started to cry. Do you not know that moths are capable of great tears and sorrow and heartache? Well, this moth was, even if no other moths on planet Earth are or were or will be. Because, scientifically speaking, the moth believed heartache was forcing him to evolve into a butterfly. And he said, "Doc, one story. Just one." Doc said, "Okay." Moth said, "You're a doctor, right?" Doctor said, "I thought you were going to tell a story. Don't kill me." Moth said, "Hey, hands up, don't shoot. If you want me to leave, I will. I can't pay you anything in human money. But if you can help me, I know where a lot of gold is buried." "I do." And the doctor said, "Buried? Where is this gold buried?" The Moth said. And now you see the Moth had the upper hand on the doctor. And he said, "Well, maybe I'll tell you at the end of my story." The doctor said, okay, but tell it fast. I gotta get home to my wife. And my wife, so his wife was beautiful too. Her name was Mr. Pagina. And Moth said, you hear those sirens, Doc? They might as well be coming from me. Because I'm sick of being a moth. I'm sick of it. I want to be a butterfly. And the doctor said, hold your horses. I studied science at the University of Science. And no such thing is possible in one generation. You need to have at least 8 grandkids first. So the moth said, okay, well, can I tell my story? Doctor said, all right, I'll allow it. One story. So the moth said, I was looking for the DVD, right? Doc was like, DVD? You guys watch DVDs? Moth said, I've had the entire Criterion collection, except for one DVD. The doctor was impressed. His wife was calling him, but he muted the call, put it on silent, and put his phone in his desk drawer next to a little Lucky Charm that only he knew about. And he closed it. He said, go on. Moth said, I can't remember the DVD, though. Have you tried to sort through DVDs without scratching them to find one lost one in the entire Criterion collection? I think not. Doctor said, what was the movie about? Moth said, here's the problem. I only listened to the DVD commentary track. Doc said, very interesting. Go on. Moth said, well, in this DVD commentary track, I think there was like 2 guys, right? And I think one was called like White, right? And one was called like a black guy, right? And they were talking, and they were friends, and they made this movie, but I can't remember who was the director and who was the assistant director. Doc says, you have my attention. Moth said, well, here's the point. One of these guys was talking about how they directed the scene, and it was either the assistant or the main guy. And in this movie, oy vey. Doctor said, oy vey, are there Jewish moths? And the moth said, just let me tell the story, please. So the doctor said, okay, but he did remove his Lucky Charm and began stroking it under the table, just in case. Because he knew that if he chanted a magic incantation, because it was actually a digital Lucky Charm that had AI microchip in it. And Ma said, he said, these are not the droids you're looking for. What does that mean? So you're talking about George Lucas, Star Wars? That's the most famous movie in the world. It's not even a Criterion. Why the heck did you come here to ask me that? And the moth said, well, the light was on. And then he ate the doctor